You're listening to Full Circle Weekly News of the open source community presented by Full Circle Magazine. Eric the Unready is off this month. I'm your host, Moss Bliss. This is episode 456 covering week 10, March 9th to 15th, 2026. FreeBSD 14.4 is out, the latest update to the aging FreeBSD 14 series for those not yet ready to upgrade to FreeBSD 15. FreeBSD 14.4 backports various improvements and fixes for those still planning to use this release branch. FreeBSD 14.4 brings a number of application updates, such as minor updates to OpenSSL and OpenZFS and XZ. FreeBSD 14.4 also includes new hardware support, thanks to various device driver changes, such as for supporting the Fujitsu RAID controller SAS D3116 controllers. FreeBSD 14.4 also adds 9P file system support for use with the Beehive VirtIO 9P devices as a nice virtualization enhancement. There is also a fix to prevent hangs on AMD systems with recent Microsoft Windows guests while using the Beehive hypervisor. The Kitty 0.46 terminal emulator is out, introducing several long-requested usability improvements. One is the addition of pixel-based scrolling in the scrollback buffer. Instead of jumping line by line, scrolling now moves smoothly at the pixel level, providing a more fluid experience. On Linux, Kitty 0.46 introduces momentum scrolling for touchpads and touchscreens, allowing the scrollback buffer to continue moving naturally after a gesture. On X11, high-resolution scroll events from modern touchpads are now supported. Another notable improvement is tab management. Users can now drag tabs in the tab bar to reorder them. Tabs can also be moved to another KittyOS window or detached to create a new window. Window management has also been enhanced. Users can now resize terminal splits using the mouse by dragging window borders. This feature works across layout modes and can be configured using the window_drag_tolerance setting. Kitty 0.46 introduces a new command palette that lets users browse and trigger both mapped and unmapped actions. This feature provides a centralized way to discover and execute commands without needing to remember specific key bindings. Users can now display configurable titles for individual Kitty windows using a window title bar. The configuration system now supports 0KLCH and lab color spaces in kitty.conf. On Wayland, support has been added for the background blur extension, while macOS users gain Apple dictation input support and stability fixes. Numerous regressions and bugs from earlier releases have been addressed. These include fixes for tab bar rendering glitches, ncurses behavior, emoji alignment on Linux, session handling issues, and problems affecting key repeat events under Wayland compositors. Sigil 2.7.5 has been released, a free open-source and cross-platform ebook editor designed for editing books in the EPUB format, supporting both EPUB 2 and 3. The new release introduces several enhancements, including the addition of possible shortcut ID numbers to the clip editor to make assigning clip shortcuts easier, as well as min and max buttons to the title bar and the reports and spellcheck editor to ease use on small screens. Sigil 2.75 also extends the Python function replace feature to allow easier creation of a sigil match object, adds a status message when updating the validation result, and adds a Unicode code point name to the status bar for the character after the cursor in the code view. Also added are a save selected data to CSV option in the spellcheck editor dialog in the pop-up menu, extending the code point name to include the code point itself, and converting the clipboard history selector and MD viewer get info dialogs to be non-modal. They redesigned how web cache profiles are used and cleared to improve the stability and speed of the application. They redesigned how web cache profiles are used and cleared to improve the stability and speed of the application and other new features. This release uses Python 3.14.2 and Qt 6.10.2. Multiple bugs were addressed as well to improve the overall stability and reliability of the application. You can download Sigil 2.7.5 as an app image bundle that you can run on any GNU/Linux distribution without installing anything, as well as binaries for macOS and Windows. OBS Studio 32.1 is now available. OBS Studio now has WebRTC simulcast support. The OBS WebRTC output supports simulcasting for multiple quality levels to be sent over one track in WebRTC/WIP. Also introduced are a new audio mixer, the addition of undo-redo actions for scene items, and partial support for canvases to the OBS WebSocket. OBS also sets the default bit rates to 6000 kbps, enables palette for light theme audio mixer, rearranges default dock positions, and various other improvements. Downloads and more details on OBS Studio 32.1 via GitHub. The AppArmor Linux kernel security module used by Ubuntu Linux and currently maintained by Canonical has been affected by several vulnerabilities. Qualys researchers discovered vulnerabilities within the AppArmor code of the Linux kernel, which they are calling CrackArmor. Some issues can lead to denial of service to kernel memory information leaks, but when paired with sudo discovery, can together lead to a local privilege escalation. The Ubuntu blog is publicizing these AppArmor security vulnerabilities and the important fixes. Updates for all affected Ubuntu releases are rolling out. There are 11 fixes listed in the tracking ticket. There is an issue for sudo that can in turn lead to privilege escalations for local users. Also discovered to be unsafe was behavior within the SU utility that can lead to the exploitation of the AppArmor vulnerabilities in host deployments. The sudo issues affect Ubuntu Linux releases back to Ubuntu 22.04 LTS. SU hardening and util-Linux goes back to Ubuntu 20.04 LTS. Mesa 26.0.2 is the latest biweekly stable point release for this set of open-source graphics drivers predominantly used on Linux systems. There is a wide assortment of different bug fixes in Mesa 26.0.2. No particularly big fixes stand out with this point release, but a lot of small changes, such as several Zinc OpenGL on Vulkan driver fixes, a few Intel ANV Vulkan driver fixes, a dry conf workaround for the game's No Man's Sky with NVK NVIDIA Vulkan driver. The old Radeon R300G and R600G driver have seen a few minor fixes. The RADV Vulkan driver has a few fixes for a possible GPU hang, fixing copying images with different swizzle modes on SDMA7, missing L2 cache invalidation around streamout on RDNA4/GFX12, and others. A GLSL workaround for fixing OpenGL rendering with MDK2 HD, and various other minor bug fixes. KDE announced the release of MarkNote 1.5, the WYSIWYG note-taking application for the Linux desktop, which lets you create, edit, and organize rich text notes. Highlights of MarkNote 1.5 include the highly requested source mode, allowing you to bypass the rich text WYSIWYG interface entirely by turning MarkNote into a dedicated source editing app, and support for internal wiki-style links for notes with cross-notebook lookup. Also new is the full-text search and replace functionality. Moreover, the new MarkNote release introduces a KRunner plugin to make it easier for Plasma users to search and access their notes. The new MarkNote release also makes it easier to manage your growing number of notes by displaying how many notes your notebook contains, while allowing you to easily move notes between notebooks via drag and drop, and easily create templates and copy existing notes with the new duplicate note action. MarkNote 1.5 adds beautiful all-new animations for note and notebook items, and the search bar brings back the smooth sidebar transitions for a dynamic navigation feel, and adds full undo-redo functionality to the quick sketch dialog. Of course, there are many more improvements and bug fixes, especially to table formatting and actions to make managing grids less frustrating, as well as a Flatpak bug that prevented notes from opening via file managers. GIMP 3.2 is out, a major update of this open-source free and cross-platform image editing software for GNU/Linux, macOS, and Windows. Highlights include new non-destructive layers, a new paint blend mode called Overwrite that lets you directly replace the pixels over the area you paint, a new setting in the text tool to control the direction of the text outline, and automatic matching of Linux and Windows OS themes. Also new is support for using Art, another raw therapy, as a camera raw loader, a new option to export to Krita's KPL palette format, support for importing Photoshop patterns, and support for using presets from Photoshop's Curves and Levels filters in GIMP's Curves and Levels filters. More features include initial support for exporting Photoshop's PSB files, support for importing APNG animations, support for loading multi-layer OpenEXR images, and support for importing and exporting JPEG 2000 images. This release introduces support for loading and exporting Sony PlayStation 1 TIM textures and images, theme colors for brush, font, and palette tools, and support for importing Jeff's image format .jif. This release also improves non-destructive editing, updates the CMYK color selector to calculate and display the total ink coverage of the selected color, and improves the foreground selection algorithm and the merge filter checkbox. There are also some notable UX/UI updates in GIMP 3.2, such as support for the palette dockable to automatically select the next swatch when you delete a previous one, as well as support for lock pixels to generate an undo step in undo history. The Debian project rolled out the 13.4 update to the stable Trixie series, consolidating corrections for security vulnerabilities and serious functional issues across a wide range of packages. There's not much to do with this release because most of the fixes were already included in earlier updates. 13.4 just brings them together in one place. Debian delivers bug fixes for a broad set of packages, including HTTP/2 regression in Apache 2, enhancements to Bird2 routing software, crash resolutions in Dovecot, and corrections in the DPKG package manager. The release also features updated upstream versions of the MariaDB, Samba, Xen, Flatpak, OpenSSL, PostgreSQL 17, and QEMU. Several low-level components received updates. The glibc library was refreshed from the upstream stable branch to address vulnerabilities and memory handling issues. This update also changes the currency symbol in the Bulgarian locale to the euro and resolves bugs in optimized functions. In addition to package fixes, Debian's security team issued a large set of security advisories covering widely used applications and libraries. These include updates for Chromium, Firefox ESR, Thunderbird, OpenJDK, ImageMagick, Nginx, PostgreSQL, Bind9, and many others. Sparky Linux has published new installation images for its semi-rolling branch with the release of Sparky Linux 2026.03, codenamed Tiamat. These updated ISOs are based on Debian Testing Forky and include the latest updates from both Debian and Sparky repositories as of March 14, 2026. This release updates the installation media without introducing a new version. Existing Rolling Edition users do not need to reinstall. A standard system update will provide the latest packages. The updated images include Linux kernel 6.19.6 by default. Additional kernel versions are available through the Sparky repositories. The release features Firefox 140.8.0 ESR and Thunderbird 140.8.0 ESR. Users can install Firefox 148 from the Sparky repositories. The distribution also includes the Calamares 3.4.2 graphical installer, as well as GCC 15 and GCC 16 base packages. The Sparky CLI installer, Sparky Installer, now offers the option to install the 32-bit IA32 version of Grub UEFI on 64-bit machines. The project notes that installing Sparky Linux on UEFI systems requires an active internet connection. For those systems, the graphical Calamares installer is recommended. Installation on older hardware with a 64-bit processor and BIOS or UEFI firmware can be completed using the CLI installer with the sudo Sparky installer command. Sparky Linux 2026.03 is available for AMD 64 systems in several editions: LXQT, KDE Plasma, Mate, XFCE, Minimal GUI with OpenBox, and Minimal CLI for a text-only environment. SuperTux 0.7 officially released overnight for this nostalgic open-source game, now seeing its first new release since December 2021. SuperTux 0.7 brings many significant improvements for this open-source game inspired by Super Mario. The 0.7 release announcement explains the first new SuperTux release in more than 4 years. Quote, "The SuperTux team is pleased to announce the stable release of version 0.7.0. You may wonder what took us so long to develop another release. Over the past couple of years, we've made dozens of changes and improvements to the game, bringing it to a much more polished state. As such, this is likely one of the biggest releases since Milestone 2. Despite that, SuperTux remains the trusted run-and-jump game you know well, but with this update it should bring it into a much more finishable state moving forward." End quote. SuperTux 0.7 brings new sprites and abilities for Tux, such as slop sliding and rock rolling and crawling. SuperTux 0.7 also brings revamped graphics, a complete level design and story rework, new music, and various other in-game assets. SuperTux also now supports local multiplayer mode and new gameplay mechanics. The release also revives its Android port and also provides Flatpak builds, downloads, and more details on SuperTux 0.7 via GitHub, including Flatpak and AppImage Linux builds. You've been listening to Full Circle Weekly News. For more details, see the next issue of the magazine at fullcirclemagazine.org or check the links in the show notes. You can contact me at bardmoss@pm.me as usual. I'll be back next week.